Okay, let's go to Julie in round 4.
Okay. This one that I'm going to read, it has a connection to music too, which is that I think you might call it contrafacta. I wrote it to the tune of a song in my head, and the song was Tennessee Waltz, da da da.
Really?
Da 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 da. But anyhow, it's a New Year's Eve poem, thinking back to falling in love with my high school boyfriend on a New Year's Eve, and then well, I guess I shouldn't give away the ending. But anyhow, it's Snow Globe. It was snowing on our first date to a New Year's Eve party, but we never got out of his car. We just sat there in our snow globe and kissed, wearing mittens, while our friends asked, who knows where they are? In the beam of a street light, snow fell on the windshield, so lacy and silvery white. When we started to shiver, he'd click on the heater. It was warm in our snow globe that night. But of course, we got older. The world came between us. His daughter is twice our age then. Someone told me his heart stopped as he shoveled the sidewalk. I'll never love winter again. It's really meant to be sung, not read.
It's perfect. It's perfectly set for the cadence of Tennessee Waltz. I was listening specifically for how you fit the phrases, and it's perfectly set. And one of the, I mean, you took my little course on writing song lyrics, and I did talk about how if you can generate something like this that fits over a regular pattern, in this case in 3 or 3/4 time, then you could get together. Either you could do it yourself, create a melody for yourself, or you could get together with someone who could create a melody for this, different from the melody of Tennessee Waltz, and have your own song. Because it's already written to fit. And so if you just have a melody with different pitches, a fundamentally different melody that takes into account the changed words that you've got, you would have a completed composition that would not be Tennessee Waltz at all anymore. So you wouldn't be sued.
I get sued for my meter. That would be great. That would be a great way to go out as a poet.
That is not part of the copyright law as it's currently written.
It's triple meter. Sure.
That's funny. That's funny. Well.
So cool. Such a fun poem. And I mean, sad, very sad poem, of course, but it's just so evocative of that age and that feeling. And that I love the idea of this, the repetition of the snow globe and the protected sense of being protected and in this ideal, perfect little world set apart from the real world, until, of course, that killer third stanza when everything just gets shot to hell. It's really, it's very
it's a much more apt and compelling image to call the scenario the snow globe, when every other time I've ever heard about people making out in a car, it's like they're steaming up the windows. That's always what you hear. But what you've got is this beautiful, delicate, I mean, it captures the emotion in such an apt way, because as you describe that experience, it doesn't have any of the connotations of steaming up the car.
No, there's a sort of innocence about it. And
exactly.
I think the innocence comes from the mittens.
That absolutely helps.
They keep their mittens on, and only children wear mittens. Adults don't wear mittens, so there's something very sweet and very innocent about the kissing is like, this kind of chaste kissing. It's not, you know, hot and heavy making out. It's kissing. So
Right.
Kissing,
yeah,
kissing.
it's so the delicacy of the scene is also reflected in the delicacy of this new budding relationship between these
Yeah.
two young
Yeah.
people.
And
Yeah.
even to take it a step further, because you could have had the snow globe in the car parked anywhere, but the juxtaposition is they were going to get out of the car and go into a New Year's Eve party, which is by definition raucous, blurred, and imprecise.
Mhm.
Okay. But no, they don't get out of the car because they're in a world, and the snow globe is a perfect image for it, that is contained and very precise and has its innocence. So it's, I mean, there are layers to the way that this works that are not immediately apparent, even though there's a very strong immediate feeling that's evoked. But then when you start looking at the details and how they support that feeling, you see how well put together it is. And again, I would ask you, did you think about this when you were writing it?
You know, I was occasioned to write it, you know, hearing about, you know, the death, you know, of this man who was, you know, my high school love, and wanting to write something about him, you know, and he did, you know, literally have a heart attack, you know, while shoveling snow. And that just reminded me, you know, of the night that we fell in love, which, you know, it was our second date. You know, the first date, you know, we had a normal first date. And the second date, we were going to this New Year's Eve party, and we kept meaning to get out of the car and join the party. But we, you know, we were also talking, you know, talking about like Catcher in the Rye. And it's like, he read this book and he thinks about this book, you know. It was just, it was, you know, a first, you know, first real love experience, and it was innocent, and we, you know, we were probably wearing mittens and not gloves. And, you know, it was, I think we finally did go in just before midnight. We finally did leave the car, but it kept getting really cold, you know, and he'd have to start the car again.
You know, we're talking about the innocence. I think that this moment, capturing this moment, which is to say a turning point at the very beginning of a relationship, and evoking the very, very specific feeling of it, that hopefully we've all had this feeling. I don't know that I've seen it done all that often. And even by you, Julie, you have many, many other love and love-related poems that are set far up the trail from this moment, if I may put it that way. So I just think it's a great thing to try to capture. And partly I say that because I've tried to do the same thing. I have a song that tries to do the same thing, and I also have a poem, both based on the same events that happened to me younger, but it was an innocent thing that I had with a girl when she was 13 and I was 14, and we used to disappear. It was in the summertime, and we had summer cottages that were adjacent to each other, and we would disappear and no one would know where we went. And where we went was under these were houses in New Hampshire that they had no foundations, they had no basements, they just had cement blocks that they were built on. So there was a crawl space under the house, and so she and I would crawl under her own house, and we would just lie under the house talking to one another quietly and holding hands and kissing, and we could hear her family walking on the floorboards above us. And we knew that they had no idea that we were down there. And you use the image of a snow globe, which is a perfect image for what you're talking about. And I wish I could have thought of one that would have been as apt. But what I did instead was to write a poem about the feeling of being under the house and how the girl talked, and then I wrote a song about it. It's called "Lie Under the House with Me."
That's great.
It's not one of my.
Be my love, right?
Well, it's a little.
Yeah, that's right.
A little
Sometimes
different.
Be my love, lie under the house with me. I don't know which of the. They're both irresistible, you know.
Seductive, I think. Right.
Well, and of course, I think at the end I have an ending that's not as dramatic as yours, because of course you're recollecting this moment when this guy his life has ended. But of course, the summer ended, and then she moved away, and then we never saw each other again. And that's probably part of the poem, at least. It's not part of the song. The song creates the mood and stays in it. And that's something you can do with music, but you've done it with words in this poem, and I think that's just great, because I don't see it done as often as I would like.
Oh.
I mean, we have way too much down and dirty stuff. We don't need any, really, there are few revelations in that sphere. Well, that's a good one. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Wonderful.
Number 4, Angela, we're rounding the far turn.
Rounding the far turn. And speaking of young people and love and innocence, this is kind of where my Catholic mind goes, because we think of the birth of Jesus, but the birth of Jesus, of course, is inextricably, or is the consequences of the Annunciation, of the conception of Jesus.
Yeah.
So I always enjoy thinking about, and I'm not the only one, I mean, art, but Western art is full of depictions of the Annunciation, and it's one of my favorite tropes, because every artist conceives of it differently. Even individual artists will have multiple Annunciations, because they just want to kind of capture this moment of this very, very, very young girl who gets this momentous news. And it's like all of creation, all of human history is being put in the hands of a child, a 12-year-old child. So it's really quite a powerful story of this youthful, innocent girl who gets this amazing privilege, right, and challenge. So one of the Annunciation poems, I've written a number of them, because I continue to come back to this moment. I wanted to kind of capture in this poem the dailiness of a girl like Mary, finding out this news, and kind of set her in a contemporary context, because just like the Christ child gets born over and over and over again, the Annunciation is something that happens over and over again in the Catholic imagination, right? We all have Annunciations in our lives where we get some momentous occasion and news, and the opportunity to accept it or to refuse it. So this particular poem is in my book, Saint Sinatra, which is about would-be saints, some real saints and some rogue saints. Sinatra is one of the rogue saints, but the real ones, Mary is one.
Nice mugshot.
I love this mugshot.
Yes.
I didn't want to have to pay for a picture, and so when I found out that the mugshot was in the public domain, I thought that's the one I'm going to use, because it's free. So this particular poem, it's one of the last poems in the book, it's a ragged sonnet, and it takes off from the last line of in the Gospel of Luke, when Mary's Annunciation that story is told, and after she says yes to the angel, let it be done to me according to until thy will, and then the last line is, and the angel left her, and it's always been very interesting to me, like, and then what? And then what did she do? The angel leaves, like this is like the middle of the drama, and I want to know what Mary does, and we just don't know. So there are lots of different possibilities. So this is called And the Angel Left Her. So there she stood, alone, amid a stillness as loud as any earthquake she had heard. The eaves creaking in the absence of wind, the hiss and tick of radiators warming the house along with the soon coming sun. Her hands touch her belly, swelling already, like dough cupped close in an earthen bowl. She knows it won't be long before she shows what to do with all this sudden silence. Phone her boyfriend, Joseph, I have news. Text Saint Anne, dear mother, I'm afraid. Drop to her knees, now weak with recognition, and kiss the space he filled a moment past in answer to the question he had asked.
Oh. Yeah.
Well, you gain a lot of depth by putting it into a contemporary setting.
Yeah.
You know, you gain a lot of identificatory power.
The radiators and the cell phone and texting. Yeah. Yeah.
Because it's a universal predicament that young girls and women have found themselves in. I mean, they're not all that particular one, but then because you updated it, this is and is not. It's Mary Ann. It's not really Mary Orr. It's Mary Ann.
Mm-hmm.
Lots of other young women.
Yeah. Anybody who's ever got that news and has very mixed feelings about it, right? Telling us,
Yeah.
other being afraid, being excited, being stunned.
Yeah, this is really, this is a very good example of the kind of poem that as a man, I need to experience because I couldn't possibly have imagined it, you know. But I can ask myself the same questions, you know, well, what's it like? How do you feel when you are confronted with this and your feelings are mixed? And you do that for me, which is good because I couldn't do it for myself.
The girl has never experienced this either, you know, in the poem. Her body is changing in ways that are just, you know, unrecognizable to her and, you know, and new and strange. So your reaction is, you know, in a way very much like her reaction to what's going on, you know, when you say you haven't experienced that or couldn't experience that.
Well, it's parallel, but I wouldn't kid myself into thinking that I
not the same, no.
feel it. Yeah, no, I can't. You got to know there. You got to go there to know there, and I can't go there. But I can be told by someone who knows there, and I welcome it. That's a great thing, because it does particularize that story that, of course, I grew up reading and learning about, and I guess it's different if you're a woman because you can identify with Mary at different stages in her life, at different stages in your own lives. It's probably natural for you to do that. Is that a fair thing to say?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, any Catholic girl in any culture, Mary is like she's the model. She's and you know, for better, for good and for ill, she can be this impossible figure set on a pedestal that you can never measure up to. But she also is human, and this sets her apart from Jesus, and sets her apart from God and the Holy Spirit, and also she's a woman. You know, she's all the prophets and the disciples, like they're all men, and they all have men's concerns, but Mary, she has woman's concerns. And so she definitely figures very largely, I think, for Catholic girls.
It's an interesting. I can remember studying when you go through the prayers. there are the prayers to Mary asking her to intercede on your behalf. So you're not praying to her as a deity. You're praying to her as an intermediary, as someone who is as an empath, someone who will understand your human issues because she's fully human.
Yeah.
And so you can do that as a male, as a boy or a man, but you're talking about dimensions that are close to us. And both of those things are simultaneously true. I mean, she's a fascinating figure, and you can understand why there was such a powerful tendency, so many movements that made so much of her role. And also, I think about the power of the Pietà, of Michelangelo's Pietà, that the universality of what he did, and the impact that comes with his sculpting a mother holding the body of her son, and she seems somehow not to have any age at all. She's not a girl. She's not a mother. She's like a kind of an ideal version of womanhood, but she's also clearly, her emotions are so accessible and human that somehow he had it both ways, and she's completely human, and yet there's this element of otherworldliness, which is very appropriate in a circumstance where we're asked to wrestle with the idea of Jesus being simultaneously fully human and fully divine, which is always a hard thing to deal with. And as from a man's perspective, that's the side of it that you wrestle with as a man, that you understand, well, okay, if he was human, then he was like me. But then how could he not be like me? Completely not like me, and yet completely like me. So we get hung up on that interpretation of the incarnation. Whereas with Mary, she speaks in a very unique way to women.
And she's totally human. She's perfect, theoretically, born without sin, but she's a human being. And also theologically, Mary is, I think to most men, Mary is their mother, and so she is this caregiver, this person that took care of you from the time that you were a zygote, and so that's how you think of Mary. But I think women have the opportunity to think about Mary as mother, but also Mary as a sister, because Mary goes through what you have gone through as so she's like your sister. And in this poem, I even was thinking about, like, I have 3 sons. I don't have any daughters, but I was thinking about Mary as the daughter I never had. Like because she's 12. She's a little girl, and so I think women have this opportunity to relate to Mary in a variety of ways. That is not just the mother of God. It's like she fulfills these different roles, as you say, throughout her life. She conceives of the baby, she takes care of the baby Jesus, then she's the mother who holds him in her lap. She gets supposedly ascends into heaven, Mary, Queen of Heaven. So she's got a whole range of roles that women, I think, can, at whatever stage of life you're at, relate to. And also this sense of like that, the overshadowing. I can honestly say that of all the experiences I've ever had in my life, the most otherworldly, supernatural experience is being told for certain that you have another person's body inside of you, that you are going to gestate for the next 9 months, and then a new human being is going to emerge. That's the closest thing to magic I've ever experienced, in my life. And even though it happened 3 times, like the 3rd time was just as weird as the first 2. It's like, this is like crazy. How could this happen? And so I think, you know, I totally identify with her sense of like, holy crap, you know, like seriously. And having the fact that we have a scientific explanation for it doesn't make it any less amazing, you know, or any
Yeah.
less. It's still a magical thing how, you know, matter like can produce a life and a brain.
Yeah.
You know, it's magical.
Yeah.
It's a
The
great thing that you've written about it and that you're talking about it now. I have often said, excuse me, that I envy women that power, and that it's a pale imitation, but the closest I can get is to be creative. You know, is to bring something into the world through, you know, something that comes into the world through me, that wouldn't have been in the world without me, and it has a kind of a life of its own. But it's a very, very poor substitute, but it's the only thing open to me, you know. But I'm very, very aware that there are orders of reality that are the natural inheritance of women that are forever closed to me personally and to men in general. I wish men thought about it more often, because what you people have is something that's miraculous.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think that's part of what is so attractive and powerful. Mary is so powerful, you know, because of this. And women, of course, this is one of the reasons that's why patriarchy exists, because men want to control
Yeah.
that power that women have for such a
Yeah.
long time. They want to rein it in. They want to possess it. They want to make sure that whatever offspring come out are their offspring, you know. So
Yeah,
and so
because it's intimidating by nature.
yes, it is
Yeah.
very intimidating to women as well, you know,
Yeah.
as men, but
Well,
particularly. Yeah.
that's very well
feel-
put.
Yeah, the importance of Mary in Catholicism is really, you know, a sort of rebellion, you know, by Catholics against the church fathers, you know, who would not, you know, have included her to that extent. You know, it's the feminine principle, you know, is not part of the Trinity, is it? You know, it's but we've made her, you know, as important a part.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
don't know enough about the history of it to know when the cult of Mary really developed, and when she assumed that kind of manifold role that she had for such a very long time. But
Well, it does start in the Middle Ages and it becomes stronger in the Renaissance, but you don't actually start having like feast days and stuff dedicated to Mary until like the middle of the 19th century. And that's
really,
Wow.
yeah, and that's late for the church. I mean, it's
Yeah.
relatively recent where people were insisting like, oh no, she's got to be recognized. She's got to.
Yeah.
And it is, yeah, it does coincide with this, what some people call the feminization of the church in the 19th century, with like kind of trying to wrest it away from these church fathers and say like, there were church mothers, by the way, you know?
Right.
yes,
Right.
Yeah. So
yeah,
and there are great
even
that's what feminist theologians are doing. Like, you know, my former colleague at Fordham, Beth Johnson, one of the great feminist theologians, she has a lovely book called Truly Our Sister, and it's about Mary. It's about the relationship that
Oh,
women have with Mary, which is parallel. It's not, you know, it's not vertical, it's a
right.
parallel
Right.
relationship.
Right.
And how important, how theologically like groundbreaking and important that is, what a difference that makes. Because men really like that vertical structure, and women are
Hierarchy.
like,
Yeah.
no, we kind of like the parallel
Yeah.
structure. You know? In all things, you know, that's how we run businesses. That's how we collaborate and make things happen. You know, It's not the top-down approach. It's fascinating to me how the older I get and the more that I collaborate with people of different, genders, it's like so much easier to work with women. So much easier, except for you. Except for you.
I try to pick up as many pointers as I can from you guys as I go along. Well, now this is great. I'm going to take things to well, we've already had New Year's Eve inside the snow globe, but I'm going to read a short poem that I wrote on New Year's Eve of 2018. And this is really what it really is a kind of a writer's prayer, if that makes some kind of sense. It's called New Year's Eve. It's a little sing-songy, but you'll see why. New Year's Eve, December 31st, 2018. I sing a song for what has been and one for what will be, for time which brings and takes away and keeps rewriting me, for all that I remember right that lasts through every version, for all I hope to throw away returned after excursion. My manuscript is not complete and undergoes revision. Grant me a fresh blank page or two. Forgive me my elision.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, our last chapters haven't been written yet, which is a good thing, I think.
I love the Janus-faced quality of the poem. From the very first lines, I sing a song for what has been and one for what will be. I love the way you set it in motion. And also, I think the meter picks up on that very nicely. The give and the take, the back and the forth, the past and the future.
Oh, nice. Yeah. 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 Yeah.
And keeps rewriting me. That's my favorite line, I think.
Yeah, mine too.
I think mine too. Yeah. And yeah, this is another way of looking at it, is that we're trying to be the best version of ourselves all the time as we go through our lives. And to use a writer's metaphor, that means we're always rewriting. We're always trying to get it, maybe not perfect, but better.
Yeah.
One thing I learned, because I started out writing fiction and I wrote a couple of novels in my early 20s. And one thing I learned about writing novels is that you can't make it perfect. So from the very beginning, you accept that you're going to fall short of perfection. But if you're writing a song or if you're writing a poem, the prospect of getting it as good as it can possibly be is not that distant. I mean, I think that's what we're always trying to do, right? Every word, if there's a way to improve an individual word, we will improve it. You can't do that when you're writing a novel, or you just go out of your mind and be continually rewriting the same 10 pages for the rest of your life. And there are people who've done that. But yeah, in the short forms, everything is magnified, every word is magnified, but also there's a limit. And so you can aspire to perfect whatever form you're in. And so this little form is, I mean, it's 12 lines. There's not a whole lot to it, but I worked it until I was satisfied that I couldn't make those short lines do any more work than they were doing. So, and writers live by rewriting too, so I think it's a natural image for our ilk.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
also enjoy the revision elision rhyme. All the rhymes are fun, but that one in particular is a lot of fun. So
Yeah.
I thought I was going out on a limb using the word elision, but it is a writer's metaphor. So, you know, it walks the line between being a kind of a poem and being a kind of a, you know, a funny little tract on what it means to be a writer. But of course, in your life, in my life, there are some dropouts and blank spaces that would qualify as elisions if I really were a manuscript.
Yeah. Yeah. But it's relatable to anyone, you know, I mean, New Year's Day, you know, we want to erase the mistakes of the past and we want to start fresh, you know, and write a new future. And we all have that hope the first day of the year, and we all fall short as the year goes on. And then,
Yeah. Well, I don't think I would have had this idea if it wasn't New Year's Eve when I wrote it.
right,
Because
right.
I was thinking that exactly that. And I
Yeah.
thought, well, okay. I don't have any answers, but maybe I can describe the question.
Yeah, you're using writer metaphors, but you know, I think it's a universal, you know, universal experience, the poem.
Yeah, well, for people who even bother to take stock at the end of the year. But I mean, these are the solstice poems, I think, are a good example that these are very deep-seated cycles in our lives. And it's quite natural, even though the end of the calendar year is an arbitrary imposition. And we all know that Jesus wasn't born at the end of December, but probably in March. And it's probably closer to, to the arrival of spring, which would have made for some nice imagery along those lines. But there was a reason that they placed it so close to the winter solstice when the light begins to return, because that echoes all the way back down the corridors of time to sun worshipers and druids, and everybody understands the feeling that they get when the days become palpably longer, when the light, and it's only a few minutes every day. If you look at the sunrise and sunset times, so it takes more than one day to feel it. But when you start to feel it, it changes your mood. I mean, we're grounded that deeply in those rhythms.
Yeah.
What a cutie.
This ladybug, she's 15. I adopted her just about 2.5 months ago. She just told me she wanted up.
Wow. Well, I've put an end to round 4. Let's do the last group, which means you have your audience in your lap, Julie. What are you going to tell her?
Let me give me 1 sec to grab a book, okay? Wait 1 sec.
Okay.
We'll wait for you.
I think I'll pause.
Sure.
Talking about Mary texting Saint Anne, and Mary made me really want to read this poem and not the other one that I had. This is a prose poem, and it's Statue of Mary's Mother, and the epigraph, it's attributed to George Santayana. Who knows if he is the one who said it, but there is no God and Mary is his mother. Okay. She does not take communion on the rare occasions when she finds herself at Mass for a Catholic wedding or funeral, yet she has 4 images of Mary in her bedroom. 5, if you count the lumpy baby Mary being held by her mother, Saint Anne. That little china statue belonged to her grandmother, not the pretty flirty Graham who was the president of her local altar society, but the other one with stringy gray hair and nicotine-stained fingers, who lay in bed shrieking curses at the assholes on Boston talk radio. That grandmother, who lost her mother to cancer as a girl, wanted to be a nightclub singer until she got knocked up in her teens and had to get married. She left the church when an Irish housemaid aunt with a nest egg died and willed it all to Catholic charities. But she didn't get rid of the religious statue. She just rolled it up in a soft towel and stashed it in a bureau drawer. Mary is always a baby when portrayed with her mother because she was 3 years old when handed over to the temple priests. Did St. Anne feel sad or merely smug at having done her duty? Her likeness stares straight ahead, the gaze unreadable. One hand cups the baby's bottom and the other points to heaven.
That's wonderful.
Wow. St. Anne
Yeah.
gets her due.
I don't know about St. Anne. Did she visit Mary? Did she really hand her over? Angela probably knows.
Yeah, I'm
Or-
sure there's a lot of lore about it, but I never really thought about it, like
Yeah.
that's she's always a baby when she's with her mother. You don't really see teenage Mary.
Yeah.
Anne, yeah, with Anne. So it's
Yeah.
really
Yeah. I don't know. Somehow I was just feeling all the losses of mothers and the longing for Mary and all that sort of glomming together in that poem for me.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Anne is such an interesting figure. She's such a we celebrate the church celebrates on the 8th, the feast of the Immaculate Conception, which most people, including Catholics, most of my students, mistake for the Annunciation. Of course, different. Immaculate Conception is not the Annunciation. So I'm always like, I'll actually sometimes put that on an exam, even though it has nothing to do with anything. It's like nothing else in this class. It's that the Immaculate Conception is a different thing. But she and Joachim, conceived Mary in the good old fashioned way, even though Mary is perfect, it's still the product of, this loving marriage between these two people. So it's their love. I love those saints because they're normal people, who are having a baby. And then of course that you have Mary, and then it's a very unusual situation with her and her baby, but there is this through line, right, of mothers and daughters, being behind powerful events, right?
Yes. Yes.
Well, I think it's interesting as you describe it that there's this sort of gap where we see St. Anne and Mary when Mary is very small, and then we don't see teenage Mary. So first of all, that would be an interesting challenge for a poet to write about the mother-daughter relationship when Mary becomes an adolescent. Although I guess she becomes pregnant at 12, so there isn't much time for rebellion. But that would be an interesting thing to explore, is the relationship between mother and child when the child is Mary herself. But what was I going to say? Well, I lost it. Carry on, and if it comes back to me, I'll.
Well, we were
jump up.
talking about the through line of mothers and daughters leading up to this important event.
And grandmothers and granddaughters too. And the interesting thing to me is that even though she really was, angry at Catholicism and left the church, she didn't get rid of that statue. She kept that. You don't get rid of Mary, even baby Mary and her mother. You don't get rid of them.
Yeah, that's
And
true.
it's a
There's
soft
something.
towel that you roll them up in,
Well, and also that's in counterpoint to what turns her off to the church, which is that the inheritance is given to the Catholic charities. It's like she cuts them off. She will have nothing more to do with them. But this is where you see people make a distinction between not being able to deal with the church, but keeping the fundamentals of the faith.
Yeah.
And I think that there are an awful lot of Catholics who've made that kind of separate piece in which they maintain things, elements of their belief, while at the same time they completely repudiate what they see as unacceptable things in the church itself in terms of the hierarchy.
It's lived religion as opposed to received dogma and religion. I mean, most Catholics, I think, there are those who are like very strict and very orthodox, but I certainly didn't know any of them when I was growing up. Italians are not good Catholics.
No.
They're not terribly observant. They think
there were too many popes with children.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, they were too close to the Vatican and saying like, "Oh no, I'm sorry, these people are not the saints they're made out to be." I do think that there's this kind of realistic sense of thing, and there's just a lot of folkways, a lot of superstition that they think is more important than, and also like, again, like family and food are as sacramental as going to church and receiving the Eucharist. Like there's just
very much, very much so. So I remember what I was going to say before, and that is, I had not really known until you just said it a few moments ago that there's this sort of stretch of Mary's life that's sort of the lost years of Mary, which for me parallel the lost years of Jesus. Which is interesting because I've speculated a lot and read a lot about others who speculated on the lost years of Jesus, but I haven't ever heard anybody even refer to the fact that the accounts that we have of Mary happen around her birth and then around the time of the Annunciation.
But didn't Saint Anne turn her over to the temple priests, or is that apocryphal? That like, here, take her.
I don't know. That's a good question. I mean, I'm sure there must be lore stories about it, but we don't know much about this girl.
We don't
at all. She's actually Mary is mentioned more often in the Quran than she is mentioned in the New Testament.
Yeah.
She's much more of a prominent figure there. So, and also like one of the things realizations I had as an adult, the spiritual exercises of Saint Ignatius are very imaginative, where he encourages his young Jesuits to like put themselves in the life of Jesus and imagine themselves there. Imagine yourself at the birth of Jesus, imagine yourself at the crucifixion, imagine yourself on the Sea of Galilee, etc. But one of his meditations is imagine yourself at present when Jesus rises from the dead, after he rises from the dead and meets his mother. And it's like, well, that's not in scripture. Like nobody says he meets the disciples, his friends, he meets Mary Magdalene. He doesn't meet his mother. And Ignatius's answer is, well, of course he would meet his mother. So you have to think about that. So I love that, Ignatius is very free in terms of the story, because like we may not have the story, but it was definitely something he would have done, is go to see his mother. So there's this whole element of Catholicism, which is about, using the imagination in connection with these stories, because we get so little, and it's all
fragments.
That's lost. I mean, that's really what the parables are about. It's like some of the most interesting aspects of the parables are what doesn't get said. The prodigal son story. Like, so when the prodigal son comes home, it's like, so does he stay?
Yeah.
And do the same thing that he did before, does his brother?
Well, what you're saying about we're really talking about the canonical works and the canonical gospels, but there is a pseudepigraphical Gospel of Mary that I have not read, but I've read some of the pseudepigraphical literature, some of the Gnostic Gospels. Gospel of Peter, so there were all these contending narratives that that didn't make the cut when Nicaea happened in the 322, and all of these are works that were condemned as heretical that are there. I mean, the Gospel of Thomas I find very interesting. It's a Gnostic gospel, and there are some things in there that that are interesting complements to what we get in the canonical Gospels.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So maybe that story has been told, but it didn't come down to us.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, I never thought we'd get into biblical sources, but this is interesting. Let's wrap up the proceedings though. So Angela's got one more and I've got one more.
Okay. I am torn really because I'm thinking of sticking with Mary because we've been with Mary for a while, but then I was also thinking about this Flannery poem and her idea about the incarnation, which is probably more intellectual than the Mary poem. So I don't know. I'll go with the Mary poem. We've been talking about how we don't have any Christmas card poems among us, but this is kind of a Christmas card poem.
Okay.
Not because I don't think it's sentimental. I hope it's not sentimental, but what it tries to capture is the fact that Mary's experience of being a mother is everybody's experience of being a mother. And every mother gives birth to a baby that's just as important as Jesus. So this is a ballad, and it's what Mary knew, that he was beautiful, love's most holy writ, that he was the world in small, and she loved it, that he had undone death, that he would be her joy, that he would grow more beautiful as he became a boy, that he was grace in human form and paradise to hold, that he smelled like eternity, that he would not grow old, that he was heaven's gift, dressed in flesh and baby clothes, that he was wholly beautiful, what every mother knows.
Oh.
Yeah, wow.
Oh.
Well, that would be a very, very high class Christmas card.
Yeah.
There's too much depth there for Hallmark. But you're right, it is a universal. Again, I'm wrecked on the rocks of not being a woman.
Yeah, those are jagged rocks indeed.
That's what I'm told.
So sorry for you.
But really, all of those words ring true, and yet they can't be mine, Wow.
Yeah. I love how you bring it down to earth at the end, every mother's baby is beautiful and perfect, but not quite in that way, but.
And that she has ridiculous, impossible hopes for that baby, right?
Yeah.
Like undone death, like not really, gives you some immortality, but it's not the same, right?
Yeah.
And these are things that people actually said to me, that which the particular line that that he was heaven's gift. I remember when I was bringing my third son home from the hospital, he had to stay for a while because he had a bad case of jaundice. So I went to pick him up, and I was like, it's so terrible to be separated from your newborn baby for several days, because it's like that's like a part of your body is missing. So finally, I was so thrilled to go to the hospital and pick him up to bring him home. And so I was bringing him out to the parking lot in his little, baby carrier. And this old man, and I'm like 27 years old, right? This old man stops me and he says, "What do you have there?" And I said, "Well, this is my baby. I'm taking him home." He said, "That is a gift from heaven." And said it with such, I felt like there was something behind it, it wasn't a cliche. It was like, that is a gift from heaven. And I still remember that all these years later, 35 years later, it's like, I was so struck by, again, the magic of this, the kind of the sacramental power of this child. And I you know, so when I was writing the poem, it's like, yeah, he was heaven's gifts. Like that's just how I felt about it when I was holding somebody who wasn't the savior of the universe, but he was well in bed.
Never say never.
That's true. I maybe giving him short shrift by thinking that's.
Well, one of the things that I find I'm encouraged by the fact that you kind of finesse the question of how much Mary knows about the future life of her child. And so, I'm reminded of Auden's The Shield of Achilles, where Thetis sees Hephaestus makes the shield, and she sees kind of the future of the destruction, the war, and the death of her son. Because when the sense I got from studying was that Mary was not unaware of the arc of her role and the arc of her son's role in history. But you don't get into the kind of foreshadowing of what also comes with the life of Jesus. And I like that, because that would have been an easy thing to do, but part of the meaning of the incarnation is that you need the incarnation to get to the crucifixion. You need the crucifixion to get to the resurrection. So as painful as the crucifixion is, the end of the story is the ransoming of the sins of mankind. It's a good story with some real pain in it. So to simply have started with the mother's feelings about the child and then introduced the foreboding that she might have felt, the way Thetis feels when she looks at the shield of Achilles, is to cheat people of the rest of the story after the crucifixion. So you evade that completely by keeping everything on the beautiful side, and that lends itself to the universality of every mother with every child. Yeah. So I mean, it was, I don't know if that was a conscious decision, but it lends a very individual strength to this poem, when you could have written a different poem that would have had a different outcome and a different kind of message and strength.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I find interesting about, and I'm not alone in this, obviously, people keep returning to meditate on this scene, painters do it, musicians do it, composers do it, poets do it. I mean, there are a lot of stages of feeling that you have when you give birth to a child. This is smitten Mary. This is Mary totally smitten with her baby. Before the news, like, get up in the middle of the night and run to Egypt because somebody's trying to kill your baby. It's like this little innocent. It's the snow globe. This is the version of the snow globe. Mary's sitting in the snow globe, and I have this perfect baby, and life could not be better than it is right now. I want this to last forever, and it please last forever. And of course, we know it doesn't. It lasts for these 1, 2, 3, 4 stanzas, and that's so true of our human existence. You have this, if you're lucky, you have this little honeymoon period where you're just so happy with this baby, and then, like, reality kicks in. You don't sleep for 7 years,
Yeah. But we know what's going to happen, and that's why you don't have to tell us in these 4 stanzas. And I'm reminded of a quote that I've always liked from Orson Welles, which is, he says, well, if you want a happy ending, that depends on when you end your story.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So you had your happy ending because of where you ended this.
Yeah.
You didn't have to bring in the other stuff. We all know the other stuff is coming. This
That's
isn't about that.
Yeah, that's the
Yeah,
next.
it's beautiful. It's a pure expression. It's beautiful.
Mhm.
So maybe it does belong on a card. I don't know. Wow. Well, we've really gotten some unique expressions out of this theme, haven't we?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, we really have. So I'm going to end it by, again, what's characteristic of me is to not end on a note of despair, but on a note of some kind of negotiated hope and a way forward, because that's what I believe in. And this was written on Christmas Day in 2016. It's called The Magi Lose Their Way. On our journey from the eastern lands, the new star in the night sky kept us on the path through many difficulties. Out of compass from our constellations, it made an easy guide, glowing and low, hovering above that distant place where lay the infant king we'd heard about. But on the way, we passed a city, ruined, desolated utterly by war. Not one stone there stood upon another. No one could be found to tell us how or why they'd met their fate, but smoke hung thick above the rubble, troubling the sky, as though the earth had somehow wrapped itself in its own winding cloth. The crackling embers in the wreckage made the only sound, their faint, dull glow, the only dying light. The waste of that place made us pause, until we saw the grounded sky bereft of stars and realized we'd lost sight of our guide. What heaven had provided, men on earth had labored to obscure. Which was our way? At first, we were despondent, overwhelmed to think that such fair promise could be lost. Contagious in that place, the darkness dimmed our faith itself, and it was tempting to sit down, curse humankind, and brood on chaos. But that would end our journey. Then the dark itself, tasting of iron, gave us the answer. The ash that clots our lungs and coats our tongues, the grit that irritates our eyes and sticks between our teeth, this shroud that pins us down to earth, is just another kind of cloud. The stars we reckon by still burn beyond. We are without original direction, but any heading is away from death. So we set out again despite confusion, blinded by what men do in this world, but trusting if we stayed on any path, however crooked man has made the maze, we would regain our sight, reorient ourselves, begin anew, and yet attain what may be reached from any starting point, the sacred ground of the Nativity.
Mm.
Wow. Wonderful, terrific.
My favorite line, but any heading is away from death.
Mhm.
Yeah. When you're utterly confounded, that's the only answer I can bring to that circumstance. And we've been in that circumstance for one reason or another for quite a long time now. And I don't blame anyone for feeling lost.
And yet there is this hope in the last two lines, yet attain what may be reached from any starting point, the sacred ground of the Nativity. This is this is the inverse of Yeats's, like, slouching towards Bethlehem, like this sense this is
yes.
the perennial hope, right? That's held out, that it can be reached.
Those are the key lines that you can reach. And again, I'm characterizing the Nativity by calling it sacred ground. And I often speak about the sense of the sacred that we are losing and have lost, that we no longer have. I mean, when we're not all exactly the same age, but I think I'm safe in saying that the world that we were born into and that we grew up in had, during the course of our lives as children, many different spaces which in one way or another were sacred to us.
Mm-hmm.
And whether it was a societally graced space, whether it was a religiously graced sacred space, whether it was that half hour that we had when we got out of the house and our parents didn't know where we were, and we were completely in charge of our own lives. There are different ways that we perceive the sacred. And everything that I see over the last 20 or 30 years has eaten away at our ability to feel the sense of the sacred. Mm-hmm. So I'm always looking for ways to re-inject it, the term and the idea. I mean, in a sense, lying under that house with my little girlfriend, that was a sacred space.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so
the snow globe was the sacred
space. The
space.
snow globe is a sacred space. Absolutely. Again.
Mircea Eliade, The Sacred and the Profane, that book. Mircea Eliade, The Sacred and the Profane.
Yeah.
Oh,
I've read some of the other books by Eliade, but I don't think I've read that one.
Yeah, that I have to reread it, hearing you say that, he writes so magnificently about that, that very thing, those spaces that are just out of this time and, time and space that just connect us to, to whatever it is out there, to mystery, to the sacred, to, the higher
Yeah,
power.
I mean, as convenient and as popular as it is to systematically divorce ourselves from all of the traditional sources of power so that we repudiate faith and we repudiate government and we repudiate our parents and I keep coming back to Frost's thing, never take down a fence until you know why it was put up. It's all very well to repudiate something, but that something was there to give you something that you're now not going to have. So you need to replace systematically and restore for yourself the sources of what those mechanisms and hierarchies were put there to give you. Maybe you reached a point where they weren't giving it to you anymore, but that doesn't mean you don't need it. It means you need to find it somewhere else in another way. And that's the part of the message that I think is going unsaid nowadays. People are not thinking beyond, I condemn this. They're not thinking, well, how do I live without what I've condemned? Where do I get what the thing I've condemned was meant to give me? Okay, so humans ruined it. Just as in this poem, the humans have ruined everything. The star that guides the Magi is still there, but there's so much polluted atmosphere you can't see it. So you've got to restore the sources and the seats of the power of the sacred. And we're in such an a-religious time that I go back to Joseph Campbell, who's talking about needing to have new myths as people fall out of contact with the old myths, that we need new ones that they won't reject. He was a fan of Star Wars, which is kind of a junior grade example of what people actually need something like what that gives them, But we're not out of the woods at all. And there are a lot of people that aren't even realizing that with everything that they destroy, they're going a little deeper into the woods.
Yeah, today is the feast of black elk who actually is being put forward for sainthood. And the epigraph, yes, and today's the epigraph to this book is black elk saying that the Holy Land is everywhere. That this kind of Native American sense that he had, that he brought to his, conversion to Catholicism, is that, there's no such thing as earth that's not sacred. All of it has been sanctified in some way. By, first of all, just by being part of the creation, and then the fact of human lives that have taken place on it, and we don't know the history of the spaces that we occupy, I mean, I think it's interesting in New York, we have this big sacred space at 9/11, where we know over 3,000 people died, but, find a corner in New York where somebody didn't die, I mean, all of that, we don't recognize it, we don't think of it, but it's all of, even now, there are homeless people occupying corners,
Good point.
Yeah, so there is this sense of, I agree with you completely. We need to recover a sense of, the sacredness of individuals, of each other, the sense of, the Catholic, language for this is the Imago Dei, we're all made in the image of God, image and likeness of God, and we are all equally sacred, and the space that we occupy is, but we certainly do not go about our lives thinking about each other, and about the spaces that we live in that way. And it's a richer, fuller life that we're brought to and that's that is what the incarnation is all about. That's really what Christmas is about, that reminder of our common humanity, and our common brokenness, and our common need for redemption, and our need to be kind to each other, and
it's very far away from the judgment for the purpose of raising yourself above the person you're judging.
Right.
I mean, that's the other side of it. That's what we're dealing with in extreme forms now, is people climbing over each other to get to what they think is a little higher ground. And the more that they can put beneath them, the better they think they're going to feel, which is, of course, you can also reach hell from any starting point.
Yes, you can.
Yes. A sobering thought.
So maybe I ought to
lose your way in the middle of the woods, in midlife, and
yes, you can. You can lose your way in the middle of the woods even later than your midlife.
So there's always recalculating.
There's always a fresh chance to go astray. I mean, that is our inheritance, is we can goof up at any time. Well, thank you both. This has been a really thoughtful and nourishing meditation on the nature of the holidays at the end of the year. Christmas, certainly. New Year's, certainly. The solstice, certainly. And it's great. I mean, I'm not going to lie. I knew it. I had a pretty good idea of what this would be, and it is.
Yeah, it's really been wonderful. Thank you so much for this.
Yeah, because of you two. I can't thank you enough.
It's been lovely to spend time with you both. It's been wonderful.
Yeah, neat. Well, good. So we put smiles on our own faces, if nothing else.
Yeah.
That's a start.
It is. Thank you so
much. Not a bad start. Okay, so all best wishes and cheers for the season. It's coming up on us faster than we know, and I'm going to run this in the week before Christmas. God knows if anybody will, but maybe they'll see it after the holidays die down and I put it up on my YouTube channel. That's the way a lot of people see these, is after the initial showing. So it'll be there, and it's, everyone is different and everyone is interesting.
Oh yeah, I've enjoyed all of them. It's terrific, and it's just a joy to be a part of it. And so, thank you for inviting me with Julie.
Yeah. It's
such a nice conversation. Yep. for years, so now we get to have it.
I know. I've always wanted to talk to you, and this has been such a good chance.
Well, that's great. I didn't know that you didn't have the opportunity to talk all that much up to now, but everybody's been flummoxed by COVID. So, I've said this many times, but really, I invented this whole thing to try to take the place of some of the great conversations that I had with you all and others at places like Westchester.
Yeah.
And so, this allows me to convene something with people who are in different parts of the world. And that's a good thing. Might as well take advantage of what the technology affords us. So you should all live and be well. And I guess you got a parade to go to, Julie.
This past weekend. So
you mean there isn't another one this coming week? What's wrong with those people?
Fireworks every Saturday through New Year's. Yeah, beginning Thanksgiving to New Year's. So yeah, this town gets very excited about Christmas.
That's great. So does New York.
Well,
New York goes crazy too. So
I'm actually
going to see the Rockettes with my sisters. I mean, why not?
Yeah.
Wow.
Oh yeah.
Speaking of Christmas rituals.
Well, again, thank you very, very much. And, maybe we'll meet again down the road. And I can't believe I'm well into year 3.
Yeah, congratulations. It's a really great project.
Wow. So let's say our farewells, and we will move into the next room of the dream, as somebody once said.
Oh.
Hopefully see each other in the new year somewhere.
Yeah. Yes.
I like that. Let's hope. Let's hope for that.
All
Great.
right.
It's great.
Okay.
Ciao, everybody.
Good night. Bye-bye.
So long.
Merry Christmas.
Yes.
And also to you.